Victoria Whitmore, the icy CEO, thought it was just a clever little joke, a way to remind him of his place. But James had a talent and a moment that would turn her condescension into stunned respect. And just wait until you hear how this unlikely performance rewrote the ending, and why justice, in the end, had the final word. The lobby of Whitmore and Cole Industries was a place designed to intimidate. Morning light spilled in through two-story windows, catching the edges of the chrome reception desk and gliding across the polished marble floor like a spotlight on a stage. Even the air felt expensive, crisp, faintly scented with eucalyptus from the automated diffuser. James Harper moved across that floor in quiet, practiced motions, the steady rhythm of the mop his only company. He had been working here for nearly 5 years, long enough to memorize every vein in the marble and every smudge pattern left by the rush of morning shoes. His back was straight, his strokes precise, not out of fear, but out of pride in doing things right. Even in a job most people never noticed, James believed the details mattered. A low chime broke the silence. The brushed steel doors of the executive elevator slid open, and out stepped Victoria Whitmore. She didn't so much walk as glide, her heels striking the marble with a measured cadence, click, 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 that somehow commanded the entire room's attention. Her dark hair was swept into a flawless twist, not a strand out of place. The charcoal suit hugged her frame with the precision of a garment made for a woman who never accepted almost. She was talking on her phone at first, her voice low and clipped, a rhythm of decisions and commands. Then she ended the call, slipped the device into her bag, and let her eyes scan the lobby. They landed on James. She stopped. It wasn't the kind of pause one makes to greet a colleague. It was a momentary halt, like spotting something curious in a shop window. Her gaze traveled from his worn black shoes, up his faded uniform pants, past the short-sleeved shirt rolled at the elbows, until it reached his face. It didn't linger there long. The corner of her mouth curved, not into a genuine smile, but into something cooler, almost playful, like a cat considering a mouse. "So, James, play some Chopin for me, and maybe I'll say yes to your request for extra hours." Her voice was smooth, the kind of voice that could be charming in a boardroom, but here it carried a weight that pushed down. The words floated just loud enough for them to echo faintly off the glass walls, like she wanted the space to remember them. James froze for half a second, the mop hovering above the bucket. In that pause, 100 thoughts collided. The letter from the hospital, the bill stacking on his kitchen counter, the conversation from 2 days ago when he'd swallowed his pride and asked her for more shifts to help pay for his daughter's treatment. He didn't look up at her. Instead, he lowered the mop into the water, the soft splash breaking the stillness. He wrung it out and returned to the floor, working with the same steady strokes as before, but slower now, each movement deliberate. Victoria lingered just long enough to see that he wasn't going to respond. Then she turned, her heels clicking away, the sound fading into the hallway toward the executive suites. For her, it was a moment of light amusement, a throwaway line that would be forgotten before her next meeting. For James, it wasn't a joke. It was a reminder that in her world, his voice didn't matter unless it could entertain her. By the time James reached home that evening, the winter light had already faded, leaving the city washed in dull orange from the street lamps. His apartment building stood at the far end of a quiet block, not the worst in the neighborhood, but the kind of place where the paint peeled in the stairwell and the elevator had been under repair for months. He pushed open the door to his small one-room apartment. The familiar creak of the hinges greeted him, along with the faint scent of chamomile tea drifting from the kitchenette. Against the far wall, under the soft glow of a table lamp, his daughter, Kayla, lay curled up on their old second-hand sofa. A heavy music theory book rested on her lap, its oversized pages making her look even smaller. Her hair, a mass of soft curls, framed her face as she turned a page with deliberate care, eyes tracing the notes printed in black. She looked up as soon as he heard him, and the smile that spread across her face seemed to erase the exhaustion of his day. "Daddy, if I had a piano, I'd play you something beautiful every day." The words landed in his chest like a quiet blow. They weren't a complaint, just a pure wish, spoken with the sincerity only a child could carry. But to James, they carried an echo, the sharp memory of promises he'd once made to himself and the dreams he'd folded away. He thought back to his early 20s, when his nights were spent in smoky little jazz clubs, his fingers dancing over the keys, pulling music out of the air like it was part of him. He had been good, not just local band good, but could have made it good. Then Kayla was born, and the gigs turned into day shifts, and the music was packed away to make room for stability. In the corner of the room sat their old upright piano, covered with a faded sheet to keep the dust off. It hadn't played a note in years. The ivory on some keys was chipped, the pedals rusted. But Kayla still walked past it like it was a sleeping friend. He wanted to tell her yes, that they'd find a way to fix it, that she'd have her music soon. But the numbers on his paycheck had already been stretched to breaking, and the only hope for extra income had been crushed earlier that morning with one mocking sentence from Victoria Whitmore. James crouched beside the sofa, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "One day, sweetheart," he said softly. "One day soon." He didn't know exactly how, but he knew this much. He couldn't let that dream die. Not hers, not his. A week later, the entire building buzzed with quiet anticipation. A group of foreign investors was due to arrive that morning, a deal that could shape the company's next decade. The conference room on the 32nd floor had been polished to perfection. Crystal glasses gleamed on the long mahogany table, fresh orchids stood in tall vases, and in the far corner, untouched and almost ornamental, sat a gleaming white grand piano. James Harper was there early, moving through the room with his cleaning cart. He'd been told to make sure every surface shone, every chair was aligned, every trace of dust erased. As he worked, his eyes kept drifting to the piano. It wasn't just any piano. The lacquered finish caught the light like still water, and the gold-lettered brand name whispered of craftsmanship worth more than his yearly salary. It had been a gift to the company from an international partner years ago, but no one ever played it. It was a symbol, not an instrument, a silent trophy in a room built for power. James set down his cleaning cloth and stood in front of it. His hands, hidden inside thin work gloves, itched with a familiar, long-forgotten ache. Slowly, almost ceremonially, he peeled the gloves off and laid them on the edge of the bench. Then he sat. The lid was already up, and the ivory keys seemed to look back at him, waiting. He let his fingers rest there for a breath, and then, without warning, the first chords of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major spilled into the air. The sound was rich, velvety, alive. It rolled through the room in gentle waves, filling every corner, softening the sharp edges of the glass walls. Even the faint, constant hum of the air conditioner seemed to fade, as if the building itself was listening. Across the table, Victoria Whitmore looked up from her stack of papers. Her eyes narrowed at first, irritation flashing at the thought of a disruption before such an important meeting. But then her expression shifted. Her head tilted slightly, her brows eased. Something flickered there, not just surprise, but a reluctant recognition. The music built, each phrase flowing into the next with unhurried confidence. James wasn't just playing the notes, he was speaking through them. The years away from the stage had not dulled his touch. They had given it weight, depth, the kind of emotion that couldn't be faked. As the final notes began to fade, the glass doors to the conference room slid open. The investors stepped inside, led by a tall, silver-haired Frenchman in a tailored navy suit. He stopped just inside the doorway, his face lighting up at the sound. When James lifted his hands from the keys, the man broke into applause. "Magnifique! Your janitor is a true artist," he declared with genuine delight, glancing from James to Victoria. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Victoria's eyes stayed on James, her expression unreadable, but the faintest trace of something new lingered there: respect. The meeting ended in a flurry of handshakes, exchanged business cards, and murmured congratulations. The investors were led toward the elevator, their voices fading down the corridor. James had already returned to his cart, sliding his gloves back on, ready to vanish into the background as he always did. But then he heard the click of heels, slow, deliberate, stopping just a few feet behind him. James? He turned. Victoria Whitmer stood there, the immaculate CEO mask still in place, but something about it had cracked. Her posture was the same, her voice steady, yet her eyes no longer held that detached chill. There was, instead, a trace of something he hadn't seen before: acknowledgement. About those extra hours, she paused, just long enough for the words to land. You've got them. And, she hesitated, as if choosing her next words with uncharacteristic care. The company will sponsor a new piano for your daughter. For a moment, James simply looked at her. The urge to remind her of that morning in the lobby, of the casual cruelty wrapped in her Chopin remark, flickered at the edge of his mind. But he didn't take it. Some things didn't need to be said out loud. The music had already spoken for him, clearer and stronger than any words could. He gave a single, measured nod. Thank you. That evening, the small apartment felt brighter than it ever had. The delivery men had just left, the faint scent of polished wood still hanging in the air. In the center of the living room stood a brand new, glossy upright piano, the keys gleaming like untouched snow. Kayla's eyes were wide as she approached it, her fingertips hovering above the keyboard before pressing down the first note. A soft, resonant tone filled the room, as pure as her smile. James stood back, hands in his pockets, watching her. The sound of that single note lingered in the air like a promise. He didn't feel the need to explain where it came from or how it had been won. He had proved his worth, not by pleading, not by demanding, but by showing the truth of who he was. And in that truth, he had found something better than victory. He had found respect.